All right. So now we will take the look at the sufficiency, second order sufficiency conditions for our problem ICP. And what was our problem ICP? Minimize f of x subject to h1 of x, h1 of x equal to 0, h2 of x equal to 0, and up to hm of x equal to 0, m equality constraints, and r inequality constraints, g1 of x less than or equal to 0, g2 of x less than or equal to 0, and so on up to gr of x less than or equal to 0. Okay, and we are going to assume that f, h, and g functions are twice continuously differentiable. Okay, this is what we are going to assume. Then, and let x star from Rn satisfy the following. Let x star in from Rn and lambda star from Rm and mu star from R dimensional space. So in fact, all the three lambda star from Rm and the Lagrangian multipliers for the inequality constraints, they are from the R dimensional space, satisfy that first they are the stationary point of the uh, Lagrangian uh, stationary point of the Lagrangian function with respect to your x variable. Second, they are feasible points. So g of x of star has to be less than or equal to 0, h of x of star has to be equal to 0, and Lagrangian multipliers. All this I am just repeating what we have done in the necessary conditions. The Lagrangian multipliers with respect to the inequality constraints are all greater than or equal to 0, and Lagrangian multipliers with respect to constraints which are not in the active set are set to 0, and there we had said that the Hessian of the Lagrangian function with respect to your variable x variables, restricted to that x variables, evaluated at x star lambda star mu star, has a non-negative curvature. That's what we had said there. Now here I am saying that this has a positive curvature on all directions y's not equal to 0 obviously, such that they are in the null space of the Jacobian of the equality constraint. So they are orthogonal to the gradient of the equality constraint, and they are orthogonal to the gradients of the active inequality constraints. So for all j's coming from, and further assuming, further assuming that the Lagrangian multipliers of the active inequality constraints are strictly greater than 0 for all j's coming from the set of active constraints, then x star is a strict local minimum of f subject to, uh, I mean, is actually is a strict local minimum of problem ICP. We have already defined the problem ICP. Okay. So the thing is, in the equality constraint NEP problem, I stopped here. Okay. Now, while giving you the sufficiency conditions, now I'm going one step further and saying that uh, the Lagrangian multipliers associated with the inequality constraints which are active are strictly greater than 0. And this motivation I think I gave in the linear uh, LIP problem, the linear inequality constraints, because then it ascertains that actually the all feasible points in a small enough neighborhood will have a objective function value which is larger than 0. The same idea is carried forward here. To explain its importance, to explain the importance of this point here, that mu j star should be strictly greater than 0, we will consider an example which is the problem. So this is actually proposition. Uh, this is proposition 3.3.2 from the Buttsikas, and now what I am giving you is also the example discussing is example 3.3.2 again from Buttsikas. Okay, so let's look at the function minimize. This is a two-dimensional problem. Minimize half of x1 square minus x2 square subject to x2 less than or equal to 0. All right. Okay. Now, first thing, observe that observation 1. I can take x2 to minus infinity. I can keep x1 to 0, and my f of x will be unbounded below minus infinity. So there is no global minimum to this problem. It is unbounded below as far as global minimum is concerned. Now, if I write its Lagrangian function, if I write its Lagrangian function x1, x2, mu I use for inequality constraints. Okay, so this is half of x1 square minus x2 square plus mu of x2 minus 0, or simply mu of x2. And if I evaluate its stationary point, suppose I am looking for a local minimum, so I evaluate its stationary point. So I will get x1 star plus of mu star, no, nothing, x1 star should be equal to 0. And if I take the partial derivative with respect to x2 and set it to 0, then I will get minus of x2 star plus of mu star to be equal to 0. So therefore, uh, I get, I get that x1 star equal to x2 star is equal to 0, and for example mu star to be equal to 0 satisfies the necessary conditions of the above proposition. Satisfies not the necessary conditions, they satisfy the sufficiency conditions that we are discussing, satisfy all the conditions all the above conditions except that mu star should be greater than 0. No, no, is it not? I mean, you will actually so first of all to see, so this is obviously not satisfied. Uh, uh, this is obviously not satisfied. This one we need to check. Okay, so let us write the uh, let us let us write this x star mu star. So this is going to be the second order of f evaluated at x star plus mu star times, there is only one inequality constraint, so second order derivative of g of x star. But because the second term is a constraint is only a linear function, so the second order derivative is 0. So it is going to be, you have to just look at this particular Hessian of the objective function only. And the object, what is f of x of star? It is half of x1 square minus x2 square. So this diagonal will turn out to be 1. Off diagonals, there are no coupling between x1 and x2, so they will turn out to be 0. And the second derivative here will turn out to be minus 1. So now your g of x star is, this is the active constraint, is 0 1 is times of x1 x2. So therefore gradient of g of x star is 0 1. So when you look at the y vectors, you look at the y vectors which take this to 0, then they correspond to the fact that y1, y2 should be equal to 0, which implies that y2 should be equal to 0. So therefore, you are going to consider all y vectors of this particular form, and when which belong to that proper null space. And then when you look at this restricted property of quadratic form of y transpose of this is going to be y1 0 1 0 0 minus 1 y1 0, which is uh, which is y1's which is which is which is y1 square, which is greater than 0 because y is not equal to 0 and y is of the form y1 and 0. So y not equal to 0 implies y1 not equal to 0. So therefore, therefore the second order curvature information, positivity of the second order curvature information is there, yet this actually is not even a local minimum. See, if you are at 0 0, and so f of 0 0 is of course, f of 0 0 is of course 0 because your function is half of x1 square minus x2 square, and you keep x1 fixed 0 and take a delta epsilon, just take a epsilon step, minus epsilon step to be more, epsilon greater than 0, take a minus epsilon step and this becomes half of minus of epsilon square, which is less than 0. So therefore there is, this is 0 0, even though you are finding it out as a stationary point, it is not a local minimum. This is feasible, not a local minimum. Because why is it not a local minimum? Because 0 minus epsilon 0 minus epsilon is a feasible point because x2 has to be less than 0. So x2 is taken as minus epsilon, epsilon greater than 0. So it's a feasible one. Objective function immediately reduces below 0, which is 0, 0. Yet all sufficiency conditions except mu to be strictly greater than 0 is satisfied. So therefore this brings out that positive curvature alone is not, when dealing with LIP problems, positive curvature alone on the null space is not good enough. Even this has to be greater than 0. Okay. Now with this, this is actually, this example was to show the importance of why in the sufficiency conditions we emphasize that uh, mu I should be greater than strictly greater than 0 for active inequality constraint. In addition, now let me just solve one more problem for you. I think I have some time. Let me solve one more problem for you. So this is the problem number 3.3.2 of Bert-Sika's exercise problem, and I think this inequality is a very famous inequality. It's called Kantorowicz inequality. Uh, it basically we are going to therefore derive Kantorowicz inequality. So what's given here? First, let's look at what optimization problem we are looking at. We are given a vector y. Okay, so the vector y is not a variable here. It's a vector y is given, and the optimization problem that we are considering is maximize y transpose x. So x is the variable subject to the constraint that x transpose qx is less than or equal to 1 and q is a symmetric positive definite matrix. Okay, so therefore x transpose qx is going to be always greater than 0 for x not equal to 0. In particular, this is, we are choosing the constraint that x transpose qx should be less than or equal to 1. Now what we want to have to show is, show one, optimal value is square root of y transpose q inverse of y, and then establish the inequality that x transpose y whole square is less than or equal to x transpose qx into y transpose q inverse of y. This is actually the Kantorowicz inequality. Okay, so let's do it. It's fun. So let's write the first the uh, Lagrangian function. There is only one constraint, no inequality constraint. So x is of course an n-dimensional vector, and then mu1 scalar is equal to, maximize y transpose x can be written as minimize minus of y transpose x, and remember all my optimality conditions are given in terms of minimization problem, so I have to write it as minimize minus of y transpose of x plus mu times of gx less than or equal to 0 form requires us to write this as uh, constraint as x trans gx as x transpose qx minus of 1. Okay. Now, first question that will come to your mind is whether at the optimal this this constraint will be active or not. Is it not? I mean, that's the first question that should come to your mind. So suppose I want to increase the y function. So one thing which I can do is I can take x to be alpha times of y and alpha greater than 0. Then y transpose of x will become alpha times of y transpose of y, which is strictly greater than 0. And if I take alpha to infinity, y transpose x will go to infinity, unbounded above. But as I take, as I do this, alpha square, the constant value will become alpha square y transpose qy, alpha alpha y alpha coming from here, alpha coming from here will give you alpha square, one y transpose from here, y from here, y transpose y, and so this is a positive number. And if I alpha tends to infinity, then this whole thing will go to infinity, which basically means that at some point of time you will become this whole thing will become equal to 1 and overshoot it at some point of time. So therefore at some this constraint will at some point of time, uh, the constraint, uh, this will also go to infinity, this will also go to infinity, which means that x transpose qx will be violated in our less than or equal to 1 will be violated in our journey towards infinity. Hence we can come to the conclusion that this constraint will have to be active. Hence at the optimal x transpose qx, or rather I would say that x star transpose qx star will have to be equal to 1. So this becomes a, this constraint will have to be valid. Okay. Now let's write the stationary point of, uh, let's write the stationary point of uh, this particular Lagrangian function. Okay. So the stationary, when I take the when I take the with respect to the x variables at x star mu star, this is the derivative of this is going to be just minus of x of minus of y of star. X is the variable, y is a fixed vector. So the when I take partial derivative, this is actually the this is actually the summation. First term is actually the summation minus y1 x1 minus y2 x2 and so on up to minus yn xn. So if I take partial derivative with respect to x1, I'll get minus y1. If I take partial derivative with x2, I'll get minus y2, and with minus xn partial derivative, I'll get minus yn. So if I arrange it in the vector form, this is just going to be minus of y vector and plus, then I should look at the partial derivative of only x transpose qx, because with the minus 1 is being a constant, when I take derivatives it will not come in, it will not play any role. So if you look at x transpose qx, it is going to be qii, so q11 square x1 square plus q22 square x2 square up to qnn xn square plus sigma I equal to 1 to n, j equal to 1 to n, I not equal to j, xi qij xi xj Is it not? This is how it will be. So if I look at its partial derivative with respect to say xi, then from the term somewhere here there is a term qii xi square. So when I look at its partial derivative, I will get 2 qii xi. Okay, and then from the term here, xi will appear in how many terms? So uh, like xi x1, xi x2, xi x3, and so on. So like this, it will come here once from this side, and once you fix this to whatever that number is, and then keep varying this. So therefore, it will have two times it will come, once from keeping I at whatever that fixed value you are. uh, okay, let's call this partial derivative with respect to some k, so that because uh, we have already used I and j notations in the above summation. So so we will get qk2 qkkxk term here. So this also I will write it as qkk xk square. So I'll get 2 times qkk xk coming out of here from the diagonal entry. And now once I will fix I to k, so I will get n minus 1 number of terms coming as partial derivatives as q k j, and then I take the partial derivative with I is fixed to this, so it will just come as xj, and then the other set of terms I will get when I keep j fixed to the k value, and so I will get q I k and into x of I. So this is j from 1 to n, j not equal to k, and this is from I1 to n, I not equal to k. But because my matrix is symmetric, qkj is same as qjk. So therefore, these terms will each of these terms here will finally become twice the value. So therefore, this is going to be equal to 2qkk xk plus sigma uh, plus plus 2 times of sigma j equal to 1 to, or I equal to, I am going to write it as I equal to 1 to n, I not equal to k, qik xi, which is saying that x transpose qx with respect to xk is basically 2 times this ith row of kth row of this times the x vector kth, this qk transpose is kth row of q matrix. So therefore, when you for now you change from, take k equal to 1, so first partial derivative with x1, partial derivative with x2, and so on. So the partial derivative with x1 is q1 transpose x, then partial derivative with x2 is q2 transpose x. So you can now, and partial derivative with the nth xn is qn 2 times of qn transpose of x. So therefore, when I arrange it in the form of, I arrange it in this form, this is going to be exactly this Q matrix times the X vector. So now, because of this, what is why I have now calculated this here, minus of y. So So now, so this is equal to now minus of y plus mu times of 2 mu times of q of x of star. This is the gradient of the Lagrangian function, and this should be equal to 0 for stationary point evaluation. So therefore 2 mu star q star x star should be equal to y, or x star is equal to 1 by 2 mu star q inverse of y. Okay, now point to be noted here. Q is a positive definite matrix, so therefore all its eigenvalues are positive, and it always has an inverse Q inverse, and Q inverse is also a positive definite matrix. This we have studied in our discussion on positive definite matrices. Now, this expression good enough for me? Is this expression good enough for me? No. Why? Because there is still this mu star variable is sitting here. So I should, the y is known, q is known, mu star is not known. So what is it that I am missing now? I have still not used the condition that x star transpose qx star has to be equal to 1. This constraint has become active. This is something that I have still not used. So if I use that, that is, if I substitute this here, what do I get? I get now that 1 by 4 1 by 4 mu star and times y transpose, q being symmetric, q inverse is also symmetric. So x transpose, when I am writing this, 1 by 2 mu star is coming because of coming for here. Another 1 by 2 mu star is coming because of here. They have come and sit here as 4 mu star square, and then this y transpose for the x transpose part that I am writing here, the y transpose came here, q inverse transpose has come here as q inverse, and then this q is going to be put down here as q again, and then for this x star again I have to repeat this q inverse of y. So I get q inverse of y here, and this should be equal to 1. So I get 4 mu star square is equal to y transpose q inverse of y. So I get 2 mu star as square root of positive square root of q inverse of y by 2. And why do I look at positive square root? Because I want my Lagrangian multipliers have to be necessary condition itself requires that Lagrangian multiplier should be non-negative. And if y vector is a non-zero vector, so I look at non-negative positive roots, non-negative roots only. And if y is a non-zero vector, which is the case, then y transpose q inverse of y, for q inverse being a positive definite matrix, is always greater than 0. So this positive square root is there, divided by 2 will give me mu star, which is greater than 0. Now once you substitute that 2 mu star, 2 mu star, what should be substituted for 2 mu star? Under root of y transpose q inverse of y. Then the x star becomes 1 by under root of y transpose q inverse of y into q inverse of y, and hence y transpose x star becomes the objective function value at x star becomes y divided by under root of y transpose q inverse of y, which is square root of y transpose of q inverse of y. Okay, now are you at the optimal? So let's directly look at the sufficiency conditions for this X star. Okay, so I have a X star, I have a X star, I have a X star and a mu star, which is a stationary point of the Lagrangian function. So that first order condition is met. My Lagrangian multiplier is strictly greater than 0 for the inequality constant. So that part of the sufficiency condition is also met. So now only thing that I need to look at is what is the behavior of what is the behavior. I will use z now here, the term z, vector z here, because y has been consumed. What is z transpose this, where the z comes from the null space of null space of uh, this what inequality, active inequality constant. So your gradient vector was 2 times of qx. So therefore this is going to be x transpose of the gradient. What was your gradient vector? Gradient of vector of g of x of star is, I'm sorry, this, yeah. So this is a vector, mind you. This is a vector. Let's call this vector A. So then you are looking at A transpose Z to be equal to 0. All the Z vectors that you are going to consider should be in the null space of the Jacobian of the active constraints, and that is this is a fixed vector, and you are looking at A transpose Z greater than or equal to A transpose Z should satisfy A transpose Z should be in the null space of this A vector. Now what is this, what is this thing here? So objective function is linear, in this is of the linear form, right? F of x is of the form minus of y transpose of x. So if I look at its Hessian, it's a zero matrix. So there is nothing that comes out of here. And with respect to the and the Lagrangian function is, Lagrangian function is f of x plus mu times of mu times of x transpose qx minus of 1. So therefore, when I look at this, I'm sorry, x star mu star, it is simply going to be 2 mu star times of q. The only, in this case, the contribution is going to come only from the active inequality constraint, which is this. But since this matrix is positive definite, so on the everywhere, including these z vectors, which are in the null space of the A vector, everywhere this thing is going to be Z transpose 2 mu q star times of Z, which is greater than 0 for all Z not equal to 0. Because mu star being positive, this complete matrix is a positive definite matrix, and therefore it doesn't matter whichever null space it comes from, whichever vector it is there, whether it is from null space or not, this is always greater than 0 for Z not equal to 0. So all my sufficiency conditions are satisfied, and hence I can say that I have actually got a I have actually got um, a minimum. I am at the minimum, and x transpose max. So x transpose, the global x star transpose y is equal to under root of y transpose q inverse of uh, q inverse of y. Now, you can actually argue that this problem from the Weierstrass theorem, you can argue that we are having uh, constraints are closed and bounded, and the objective function is continuous. So it has a global maximum, and since there is only one maximum, that maximum automatically becomes a global maximum. Why am I saying this? Why am I bringing in this point of global maximum? By Weierstrass theorem, this is a global maximum. Why am I bringing this here? I am bringing this here because if I want to derive a generic inequality, then I cannot be working with local maximums only. I have to work with global maximums. Okay. Now what is it? What is the global maximum is y transpose q inverse of y we have established. Now what is the Cantor over which inequality that we want to prove? The inequality that we want to prove is x transpose y whole square is less than or equal to x transpose qx, and this inequality is actually used in some optimization proofs also, huh? So don't, it's not just meant for discussion purposes, but I'm just going to derive it for you today. So x transpose y whole square is always less than or equal to x transpose qx times a y transpose q inverse of y. This is what we want to show. This dot product is, in other words, this dot product is less than or equal to square root of this. Both of these numbers are positive because q is a positive definite matrix and q inverse is also a positive definite matrix. So the way to proceed this is that x transpose y, okay, x transpose y can be written as x transpose uh, okay, let me write it as y transpose x is one and the same. X transpose y and y transpose x are one and the same. Y transpose x can be written as y transpose x divided by x transpose qx multiplied by x transpose qx. Okay. Now this vector x, I mean whatever is this vector x bar, let's call this vector as derived vector as x transpose x divided by x transpose qx, x of course not equal to 0. Let's call this vector as x bar. Then what is x bar transpose qx bar? It is actually going to be so multiply this by, first pre-multiply this by qx bar will become qx divided by x transpose q of x. Okay, what did I write? Wrote now qx bar, and then when I multiply this by x bar transpose, then I will get this as x transpose qx divided by x transpose qx whole square, which is 1 by x transpose qx. So I'll make a small modification. Okay, the modification that I am going to do is I am going to call x bar as square root of this x divided x bar as, I'm going to scale the vector x by square root of x transpose qx. Then when I multiply, when I look at qx bar, this will become this particular value. And then when I look at x bar transpose qx bar, then it will become x transpose qx divided by square of x transpose qx, which is x transpose qx itself, which will make this thing to be equal to 1. Why did I do this? Why did I do this scaling? Because I want to use the optimization result that I just derived. But using that optimization result requires that x transpose qx should be less than 1. So hence I did this scaling. So with this scaling here, I can now say that y transpose x, which is nothing but q transpose, I'm sorry, which is nothing but x transpose qx into y transpose x divided by uh, x transpose qx will be less than or equal to x transpose qx. That just, this x transpose qx is just coming from here. The less than or equal to is coming from here, because this is a vector which has which is, this is a vector x bar such that x bar transpose qx is 1. So therefore y transpose x bar has to be less than or equal to, what is it that we just derived in our case? We just derived that it is going to be less than or equal to square root of so I'm sorry, this I have to derive by this, is less than or equal to square root of y transpose q inverse of y. Okay, so I have pre-multiplied and divided it by this, and then this follows from our just derived, this inequality now follows from our just derived optimality condition, and hence y transpose x whole square will be less than or equal to x transpose qx into y transpose q inverse y, and this proves the beautiful Cantor-Rich inequality. So is not, can't we say now that the optimization theory helps us to prove some very get some very non-trivial results? All right, so uh, let's take a break here. Let's stop here. Thank you.